way on you.
Now there's a song for your driving playlist today as we celebrate Gordon Lightfoot and his legacy this morning. A lifetime of music, decades of performances, more than 500 songs in his catalog, a soundtrack for our country, and music for when you want to drive past that horizon. Now, a tribute to one of the greatest Canadian songwriters from another. Look who's with us this morning, from Spain, no less. Jim Cuddy, great solo performer, great Blue Rodeo co-founder. Thank you for being with me and giving me some time today, Jim. I'm so glad to see you.
It's a pleasure. It's a sad occasion to have to come on, but I'm glad to be here.
You know, it really is. And I was telling you I was feeling so badly because I sent an email to you hoping that I could get some comments from you today. And I gather that was how you heard about this in my email. So when you saw it in writing, the passing of Gordon Lightfoot, what was your reaction?
Well, I don't think anybody thought Gordon would be around forever. I mean, everybody thought he was dead 12 years ago. So, but it's still a shock because, we have this famous Blue Rodeo history thing where played in Massey Hall and three Gords were there: Gord Downey, Gordon Pinson, and Gordon Lightfoot. And we had just such an incredible time backstage, and Gord Downey came on and sang with us. And now all three of those are gone, and all three of those people graced the Canadian scene, and not just in music, but as personalities and as people, as inspirations and examples of the way to be Canadian, the way to embrace your Canadianness. And so it's a sad passing, but I mean, he had a very significant life, and he left an indelible mark. So I guess that's good. It's just still sad.
I looked last night at the picture you're speaking of, and I'll make sure we see it this morning because it is a classic of the Three Gords. Your connection goes back decades to Gordon Lightfoot. You've often spoken of it when you got your first guitar at the age of 10. What was the first song you learned to play, Jim?
That's what you get for loving me. It's so absurd to think of a 10-year-old sitting there on a little Stella guitar. That's what you get for loving me. But I think the first time I met Gordon was at the Stein Valley benefit. So the Stein Valley benefit was a benefit out in BC in order to try to save an old growth forest. And Gordon was the headliner. Blue Rodeo was there. David Suzuki had arranged it. And Gordon, I met Gordon about 4 times during the day. And each time was brand new for him. He didn't remember me from an hour prior or a half an hour later. And he was just like, oh, this is Jim. Yeah, I've heard about your band. And when Gordon came on, to much anticipation, the first thing he said was, the loggers have got to eat too. And that was such an offside remark at an
environmental event, yes.
You save a forest. Anyway, and then it just went on from there. Like all meetings with Gord were something significant and great. He used to come to Massey Hall to see lots of shows, and you've probably been there and seen Gordon there, but he had a particular row of seats about 12 rows back on stage right, and those were Gordon's seats. So whenever you looked out from the stage, you'd see whether Gordon was there or not with whoever he brought. So always very significant meeting.
Yeah, not just, that was his house, but it became your house too with Blue Rodeo and as a solo artist. And I was seeing that when you did your very first solo show at Massey Hall, which was, I think, Valentine's Day of 2009, if I've got it correct, he dropped by backstage. Do you remember that, what that exchange was all about?
Of course. He came back, and then the next day he phoned me, which was even more, heady, because I picked it up and it's Gord. And I'm like, okay, Gordon Lightfoot. And he said, you got 2 bands. How do you do that? How do you keep 2 bands? One's hard enough. And we talked for about half an hour about bands and the difficulties of personalities. And all I wanted to do was call my wife and say, I got Gordon Lightfoot on the phone, for God's sake. But he was very interested in music. He didn't, I think of my friends, and we're old now, but I think of my sons and all their friends. Gordon Lightfoot was a celeb to them too. And that's amazing. That's a number of generations away.
So Massey Hall, did you go to see his concerts? What do you remember of those?
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I remember all, because when we first started with Warner, that was a big deal because he would always do his spring residency And it was just crazy. Like he was doing 20 dates in May. And that was Dave Tollington, who was our good friend at Warner. He would always go to all of them. I saw him in all his different phases. I saw him when he closed Massey Hall, and I saw him when he came back. I saw him in Hamilton when he was just starting to perform again after his terrible medical problem with his stomach. And in all of his incarnations, I loved it. You know, people would say this and that about him. The last time I saw him, which was, I guess, at Massey Hall when he opened it again, obviously he was weakened. I mean, he'd been through a lot. And he played If You Could Read My Mind, and he got a standing ovation for the song. It's in the middle of his set, just for the song. And everything about him, the way he used to stand, I mean, he had that night, he had a little bolero jacket, and he had a blue jacket, and he would stand. You know, Gordon, if you ever seen Gordon, he would just stand in one spot. He would never move, just stand, play, then take a break, came back, same bolero jacket, slightly different color, and the stance 45 degrees to the other stance. Obviously, he decided on that backstage. So, I mean, I love the quirkiness of Gord, all of it. I love the greatness, and I love the uniqueness, too.
Okay, and tell me about the songs. As someone who became one of the best songwriters, when you look at his body of music, the connection for you to that, what was it about the songs that he wrote that spoke to you?
Well, there are some perfect songs. There are some perfect songs where you can't imagine any alteration of the melody, any alteration of the lyrics, or any alteration of the performance, even though many people have done it. If You Could Read My Mind is one of those songs. It's one of those songs where you listen to it and you think, that's a perfect song. And I think that's why people gave him a standing ovation at Massey Hall, because it just strikes them that you can't do any better than that in terms of folk pop song. He obviously wrote big songs. He wrote, Black Day in July, Sundown. Those are great songs. Those are songs that you hear them 20 years after their release, and they're still powerful. He wrote those crazy long ones. We were supposed to do the Railroad trilogy with him on an event one time, Blue Rodeo, and again he called me and he said, "Are you sure your drummer's up to it?" And then he named the tempos. It's got to start at 88, then it's got to go to 112, and then it's got to come back to 92. Now those are very specific beats per minute. And Gordon wanted them to be exact. He didn't want them to be around that. He wanted them to be exact. So I said, sure, I'm sure our drummer can do it. And I warned Glenn, this is going to be different. It didn't end up happening, but at least we got the preparation experience.
I would love this conversation to go on as long as a Gordon Lightfoot song. I have enjoyed every moment of your memories, Jim. Thank you so much. Maybe final thought on what we've lost in the passing of Gordon Lightfoot?
This is going to be a little. So, I mean, God bless Gord. He showed us all how to embrace our Canadianness and how to be ourselves. And he was an inspiration in that right to his dying day. I mean, he died with tour dates on the calendar that he was going to make up. And he's an inspiration to musicians, and I think he should be an inspiration to Canadians just to be themselves. And he's going to be missed.
He sure is. Thank you so much for taking time from Spain for us. And just so you know, as we take a break, I'm going to play the song that you first learned on your very first guitar, okay? So here, this is the original version. Jim Cuddy, thank you. Here is Gordon Lightfoot. That's what you get for loving me. Thanks.
Everything you had is gone, as you can see. That's what you get for loving me. I ain't the kind to hang around, give any new love that I